Hey now, welcome back to another episode of the Ruby Rogues podcast. I'm your host today, Valentino Stoll, and I'm joined by a very special guest today, Kirill Kuznetsov. I'm sorry, I totally
Kuznetsov.
butchered that. Kuznetsov. Uh,
Yeah.
we invited you on because you wrote this incredible article on MRSK, which is Rails' new kind of deployment tool, amongst many other things. Do you want to just introduce yourself? What you're best known for, and give us a quick little backdrop about this lovely thing we're talking
Sure,
about today.
sure. Valentino, nice to meet you, and I'm happy to be here with you today. Again, my name is Kirill. I'm the head of SRE department at Evil Martians. We are a kind of small product development shop. We lately focus our general efforts on helping developer tools mature and grow and become better selves. There are about like 50 of us. We are mostly known for our open source projects over the years, and we are known for our Ruby projects among the Ruby community, how we helped Ruby on Rails startups grow to. But obviously, we are not doing only that, and we help our clients with all kinds of stuff. And one of the stuff is their infrastructures, and that's why I'm here for them, for Evil Martians, to do my magic and make some infrastructure to host those projects, whatever. And that's probably a quick recap like that. I can add a little bit more later because I have some cards up my sleeve.
Yeah, that's great. We're at Doximity. We're a happy customer of Evil Martians, so thank you for
You're
contributing to
very
that.
welcome.
Yeah, I mean, what we're talking about today is deployment tooling, and Rails now has some out of the box tooling to support that. I'm familiar with Capistrano. That's kind of where my bread and butter from where I came from deployments, and then kind of stopped doing it. And
Good
now
old days.
the
Old
good old
days.
days, and now I don't understand it. I mean, I understand enough to get by and help where I can, but it definitely is more and more complex. And maybe rightfully so. The apps are getting bigger. Things are more complex in the cloud. So why don't you give us kind of like a big picture? How is MRSK helping? And how is it evolved from just the standard? I have this box. I'm gonna deploy to it with Capistrano and be done with it.
Okay. Let's just pause here for a bit and step a little bit back, because to speak about that, we need to define some kind of context. And the context here is, like I've said, the infrastructure today, and helping people understand where to look or where to search for and how to process the ideas that have to be brought to life, what infrastructure to use, why do people need to think about that. And for example, have you ever had a problem where you yourself were faced with the question, how the heck we should run our project, or what should we do at this moment yourself?
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I'm always trying to just like cheat and pick one and then use that. Where really I should be thinking about it. So what is your process for that? I'm curious. Like, how do you say you're starting with a new project? We can go with there and then evolve, right? Like you're starting fresh with a brand new app. Maybe it's like for a startup environment, right? You're trying to just get something working for your deployment process that's smooth and will help with the other developers that you have. Like, what do you instantly go for there?
Well, first of all, you're absolutely right. As we're kind of focused on startups, we deal with like to 20 to 30 startups a year, and we see a lot of issues with the infrastructures. And when we see a fresh startup that needs our help, our first idea is always to evaluate the thought that it is a startup. It should focus on the business and the project, the product, delivering that MVP. So the first suggestion, the first usual suggestion that we give to our clients is to use platforms like Heroku or Flyo, because they are the only thing that offers a startup kind of this bit of magic that helps them focus on the product. And this is the starting point with this investigation. Where should we go next? And controversial thing here is that probably some startups shouldn't move any further, but some should. And this is always context dependent. Each startup should define its own path. And if we're returning back to MRSK a bit here, for example, MRSK can be already investigated here, because this is a nice new tool. Let's switch to it for a moment. This is a nice new tool. We actually are happy that we see more solutions that help you somehow partially manage the infrastructure. Basically, yes, it's a deployment tool, but it's kind of like stepping into a bit of like, let me do the infrastructure for you. You get where I'm talking? Yeah, where it spins up all those containers, figures out the seamless deploys by like shifting the traffic in between those containers somewhere on the servers, like automagically. Yeah, so this is a nice step, because people started to investigate new ways to do the old stuff, because we had Docker for years and we still struggle with running Docker containers. What do we have right now? We have not even Heroku completely suited to run in Docker images to my taste. We have some services as ECS, which are way more complex than Heroku. We have Kubernetes, which is scary to most of the people, but we'll return to that. And we have tools like Docker Compose and other orchestrators that are way more rare for people to be used. Yeah. So MRSK kind of steps in to point out that you can try to simplify things sometimes. And I again say that we do love that point of view. Unfortunately, I see the problem that MRSK kind of, like the aura around MRSK and the presentation of MRSK kind of presents a problem, because MRSK is just like a tool that solves only a single part of the problem, but is presented like in the context where Basecamp and DHH are moving to bare metal setups, massive bare metal setups with their business. And that's an excellent solution for them, but they're missing that part. How do they go from the bare metal servers to the MRSK setup, you know?
Yeah, I'm curious about that. Okay, so where is, I guess in your article, it's pretty great. You have this like breakdown of kind of like how do you decide what is right for you, right? Like, and I'm curious, just like what your point blank, what is MRSK good for, like team wise and app wise? Like, What are the like top 3 things that it does excellent and why people should use it?
Excellent question. Um, the first thing that comes out of my mind is prototyping and small experiment setups, which are not like meant to grow exponentially as they are at the moment of their like birth. Or if you have an absolute niche situation where you can benefit from the exact set of the decisions that will include MRSK, like Basecamp does, for example. It's not the only solution. We can discuss a lot of those edge cases, but like, let me just give you a downside for this situation on the Basecamp side, like on the description of the Basecamp side.
Sure.
Um, let's do imaginary exercise. Imagine that I will provide you with like 5 bare metal servers. Each has 48 cores, tons of memory, whatever. I even like screw them into the racks for you and power up. What's your next steps?
Lock it down.
Yeah, they're undefined. This is not the solution to manage the infrastructure. This is just a deployment tool, you see? And this is its limitation. This is the main limitation. So if you just need to deploy to a limited set of virtual servers, or any service, basically, but better virtual servers, you can't use it for the tasks outside of that situation. You have to do your own homework. You have to do your own preparations. You have to, basically, in the situation that I gave you, you have to either do a manual configuration for those servers. And when I mean manual, you'll obviously you're obviously expected to create some infrastructure as code for yourself that will save your future. Yeah, but you basically will invent something manual there. Yeah,
Yeah.
and when we start to grow, you'll continue to do the manual things until you'll basically be done with that, and you'll either reinvent your own virtual server orchestrator, or you'll say to hell with this all and just set up a different solution that will spin up the virtual machines for you. You see, and but when you get the, I don't know, you need to create yourself a test environment that should be shut down and spun up continuously. You can use MRSK for that. For example, on DigitalOcean, Amazon using just their bare virtual machines, and yeah, this will give you the feeling of using just the old favorite Capistrano sauce for your project, but you can't build the infrastructure around the MRSK. You need to build your infrastructure against MRSK, just general infrastructure, not against, but how should I say it? Anyway, you will have to build your own infrastructure in advance, and you have to think about the infrastructure in general. And it's way more than just deploy.
If I'm getting this right, MRSK is less about like propping up new servers and configuring them, and more about like the getting the app on the servers aspect of it.
It's a correct statement. I would have added it's a tool that gets your app on the virtual servers that you already have, because this is a crucial part. That you, that you already have.
They already have. I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense. It makes me think. I mean, I'm a Linode user, and they have recipes for propping up new servers, new virtual containers, things like that, with those resources locked down and things already set up with existing recipes, right? Like, I feel like that they're not the only platform that does this kind of thing, right? Like DigitalOcean has their droplets. You can create a new resource, a new, whatever that you're trying to get propped up and have it ready to go to use to deploy an app to, right? And I think Heroku kind of works like that, where you have to still manually create, the Heroku, resources before you can start to use them, right? And make sure that they
Just
have all
with
the.
a bit more magic.
It's Yeah, it's a little more magic, right? But it's still the same idea. You set up the resources, then you can use them, kind of thing. So
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like that makes a lot of sense to me still, right? This is still slotting more into the Capistrano realm, which I like
Yeah.
personally.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's good. It seems good. The
Yep.
Docker thing, I'm not complete. Docker is it's some magic that I like. Will it survive forever? I don't know, but it's definitely what is used, right? And so that it seems like that has been like MRSK uses Docker, right? There's no other,
Exactly. Yeah.
right? Okay, so
It's crazy. It's crazy that MRSK hadn't appeared like 5-6 years ago, and it's just only now that we see it.
yeah, I mean, I'm so. I guess I'm trying to visualize in my head how much different it is from Capistrano. And we had another episode on MRSK where Dave and I kind of dove into pieces of that. Uh, let's see, what episode was that? I think it was 592. But what about MRSK is different from Capistrano, and like maybe what ways is it similar? But also, you know, what conveniences is it giving it to you in that deployment process? Or like, let's take the step back. Okay, it's not like the Kubernetes, right? It's not the orchestration
Mm-hmm.
of those resources, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is what Kubernetes is great at. If you want to quickly spin up a new server, right? Like create a new resource, like Kubernetes is great at that. And really, MRSK is decidedly not toward that, right? Like, you have a tool for that, you use that.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
uh, so where is MRSK like? Uh, how is it different from Capistrano? Is basically what I'm getting at.
Tricky question you have for me. Okay, let's try to figure that out. It's like right now. Well, in my mind, this is the same Capistrano, but with Docker containers. Yeah,
Okay,
because do you know what MRSK in general is in 2023? Can
no.
you imagine that? No? Okay. Yeah, that's why you have me here. Okay, be prepared. The next statement is technically incorrect, but it gives a nice picture or perspective to what MRSK is. MRSK is well thought, well, well prepared solution that is basically an Ansible with an appropriate role and some tweaks
Okay,
that does just the thing of deploying those containers, because we saw clients who did basically that same thing a year ago successfully without any struggle with the just Ansible. Same thing, like literally same thing. Yeah.
okay,
Yeah, and it's great that people start to like polish the tools and make them more comfortable for the particular task. Is it's the only problem that when you polish the tool to perform the only task that it was designed to, you should definitely fit into the task and do not step even a step outside.
Gotcha. So I guess my follow-up question is, with the clear separation of like the app deployment process to the like resource deployment process, have you seen like any issues with that divide, like being like the line drawn in the sand, right? Like, as an example, like I'm thinking of Chef and or Ansible or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
where like the
Mm-hmm.
two are together, and because they're together, there are a lot of benefits to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, have you seen any issues really with that being separate?
Can you give me some more context for me to understand the question better? Maybe some
Yeah,
short
like
example.
uh, like as an example, like you can have some chef scripts that set up the resources and set up like all the different communication between those resources, right? And then they also will handle the capistrano if you wanted to encapsulate that in the same processes in their own
Mm-hmm.
recipes, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so having it shared, as the app grows, the infrastructure grows with it, and you want to scale things or handle auto scaling, those things can be handled easier because it's all kind of centralized,
Mm-hmm.
using the same tooling. So have you
Mm-hmm.
seen any issues with that being separated where you have maybe two different tools, MRSK for your deployments of the app, and then something else for the management of the resources?
Uh, I do and I don't see the issues simultaneously because, yes, it's kind of easier to understand what's going on if you have a single source of truth. And probably you can work excellent solutions around that. But I actually, Valentina, I think the question is kind of bit still too. The question is still a bit too messed or mixed to the point that there is no exact answer to that. I think we can rephrase the question to the point is how to make the infrastructure and like to that I to steer it towards that idea because uh, the deployment of the app is just one part and you're talking about like this shift around the separation or um, adding all the things into one place. It's about managing the whole infrastructure, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So,
So.
yeah, let's hone in on a specific thing then, right? Like, let's say we're introducing something new to the application deployment process that is like an addition of an email server or something like that, right? Where it's another resource that we've added that we need to integrate with the app that has a new deployment process coming into it. Maybe
Mhm.
Redis is a better example, right? Where we didn't have Redis before, now we have Redis, and the deployment process needs to, I don't know, also introduce some new configurations,
Mhm.
settings that were configured externally or are managed externally, but
Mhm.
the application still needs to set up that link itself in the deployment process, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So like having that separation, right? Like, is that really like a bad thing, right? Like, is it really harder to manage than if
Yes,
it
it
were?
is
It
harder to
is.
manage. You can forget about something like with that same MRSK problem. There is a separation between like the real virtual servers, unintended, uh, that you have on your setup and the configuration file for MRSK itself. They are in separate places, and you need to figure out yourself this connection thingy that will
Okay.
allow you to be solid on your path here. And the solution for that always was service discovery
Yep.
integrated into the core idea for your infrastructure, at least partial service discovery. When we had no Docker or when we had no Kubernetes or any other orchestrators per se. Um, we had to rely on different things, and there was chef discovery magic inside the code via the chef server. Ansible did some facts aggregation from the ground up. We had excellent tooling from and we still have them from HashiCorp. The whole HashiCorp stack
Yep.
was born to highlight the problem that people, you are doing something wrong. You're splitting the parts too far away from each other. You're just driving all these cruise ships manually, pulling all the strings. This is wrong. Not cruise ships like this freight ships with a lot of
Oh yeah.
goods on them. And this is a disaster. You need some tooling, and that's why we like, for example, Kubernetes. Let's give a different perspective here, on what's happening on the other side. In Kubernetes, if you got yourself a Kubernetes, obviously there is some separation too, because you have to get yourself a Kubernetes somehow, either on a cloud or on a bare metal service, and it's obviously hard. On bare metal, it's harder on the bare metal. You have to have some level of expertise there too. But
Can you
when
elaborate
you
on that? Because I've never had to set that up. What's
well, I can, but probably just a bit later, because we have a different topic right now.
yeah.
Uh, yeah, we can jump into that. I can give you some perspective for
Sure.
sure. Yeah, there is, in Kubernetes, there is an idea that you have. It's not a single source of truth, but you have a unified way to address things around yourself. You have a unified API which is extendable. You have the idea of service discovery using that API, just like from the ground up. It was built around this, and it was built like that on purpose to make things know to let me restart the phrase. And it was built like that in purpose to make you be able to walk around, and to make your application walk around and see things like people do. Like, that we need, for example, we understand that we need to go to the shop, we look for a shop, we go there. Yeah, same way you can do your stuff inside like a Kubernetes API. It's a crude example, but it is what it is. Yeah, for us to understand the idea,
Yep.
and this is what we like, because that way we can simplify not only the deployment process, but the deployment process across multiple systems, because they start to know something about each other's, or the scale up or scale down situations, or the self-healing situations, which is advertised by Kubernetes. But that's basically because there is some additional knowledge incorporated in the surrounding infrastructure there, which you don't have when you just talk about a single tool. So yeah, it's kind of MRSK is kind of like Capistrano for Docker, and that's it. Or Ansible, which was stripped of the additional capabilities to just streamline your application to the dedicated virtual machine.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I mean, I like that in this case because I come from Capistrano.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's
Me
easier
too.
for
Me
me
too.
it's easier for me to reason about, and mostly because I don't have much Kubernetes experience,
Yeah,
which,
yeah, yeah.
which, maybe people don't need anyway, right? I feel like introducing Kubernetes as a startup is probably a bad decision, right? in most cases. Uh,
Interesting question. Interesting question.
is it?
Maybe maybe we can, just a suggestion. Maybe we can just describe this, like the general idea of how you choose your infrastructure just a bit further,
Yeah,
if you
yeah. I
will.
mean, I'd love to know your thought process, right? Like as you're coming into it, what are you weighing?
Yeah. So you see, we have first of all, we have some experience. We see what problems people face around us, and yeah, we are experienced with like Heroku deploys, Capistrano deploys, Ansible deploys, and Kubernetes deploys, and deploys to tools like ECS or whatever. Yeah, you name it. So like I was talking before, we recommend startups to start their life from Heroku because this allows them to keep their focus. And basically, they should keep their focus as long as they can. This is the general suggestions from us when we investigate and research the situation, how to help in each particular situation. Obviously, there may be some problems on this way. For example, the costs are skyrocketing, like the most popular example. But
Yep.
this is not a problem. You see, this is a situation, and the problem is somewhere inside, underneath. And we need to always figure out that problem, because usually, like 99.9% of the time, it's some kind of like a technical limitation that makes you just drop your money there and like empty your credit cards. you know.
I'm
So
I'm curious. What are just briefly on that? Like, what are some of like the most common like wallet emptying things that you've seen?
a number of them. The I don't even have the common one here. Uh, First that comes to my mind is the bloat of the database. Like, see, okay, we can tackle this example. Excellent one, actually. For example, you start to pay enormous amount of money for your database. It's a technical problem. It's not a financial problem. You need to investigate what's happening with your product. And for example, you really do need that kind of data, that kind of amount of data that you're processing. But that raises the second question: why didn't the business uh, investigated that on its side? Because maybe the technical realization, technical solution is not what really business wants to, or vice versa. Yeah. And this needs to be in sync. This is the first like bell that rings, that is crucial for any business and technical team to of that business to watch for too, to tell the business there's something wrong. It's always the problem of that sync between the business goals and the technical solutions for these goals. If they aren't in sync, the problem is not money. The problem is with business always here. And
This is so true. That what a great point. I mean, I don't know how many companies I've been at where a product decision has been made, and then it's like nobody asked why are we making this decision, and you just build it,
yeah,
and then it turns out a year or so later, oh, we didn't really need that. We needed this other like tiny little thing, and technically speaking, and we didn't even need to build it to begin with. And
yeah,
we could have used like S3 or just a Google spreadsheet, right? Like for the front end part of the process to pipeline it in to where they needed it, right? Like there's so many things that can be just like saved from like asking the why question, right? Like
yeah. 5 times, 5 times. Remember that. This is a good framework. Yeah, I'm serious. I'm dead serious.
that's so funny.
Yeah, but it's real. It's I forgot the name of this idea, but you have to ask why at least 5 times, and go deeper with each iteration. Like, why do we pay so much money? Because the database is growing. Why the database is growing? Because, for example, we have a database bloat. Why do we have the database bloat? For example, it's technical error, or we do really have this kind of load that we are not just dealing with correctly. Why aren't we dealing with this load correctly? Why don't we process the data that way that the database can keep up and clean up itself, etc., etc., etc.? Yeah. Why isn't business aware of this problem? You see where I'm going. But I can imagine the second example for you. This is especially for this episode because it involves MRSK, Maersk, probably, yeah. Imagine you have Linode. You said you were using Linode, yeah. Imagine you have, like, I don't know, 20 servers. You did a deployment of a Ruby application across all those servers with MRSK. You're absolutely happy with it. It's running perfectly. Suddenly, Sunday evening, it fails. What do you do? How do you know it failed?
I would say, probably like a bug snag alert or something, right?
Well, you need some kind of like instrumentation and monitoring solution.
Yeah,
exactly. Let's be general and say monitoring solution, at least like web checks. What monitoring solution can you implement for this kind of project? Like a backsnack, like a Datadog, like a New Relic, whatever. And you basically, we can simplify that and say that you basically have to buy yourself a monitoring solution service. And now you have like, I don't know, maybe 20 servers were too much for this example, but like, I don't know, 5 servers. And you have a bill for like $300 for your Linode virtual machines. And you can get yourself in a situation where you get, on the other hand, a bill for like $5,000 to $8,000 for the Datadog. Again, why? And yeah, again, this is kind of like technical problem that and how should we tackle these problems? We need to always think about the infrastructure. And the only parts of the life of any project that can skip a bit on it is when you start and you try to move on Heroku as far as you can, but already you will face some technical limitations eventually, or like restrictions. For example, you need some compliances to pass some compliance tests, or security new security requirements, whatever that restricts you from using Heroku. This is the second example. At this point, you already have to be prepared to know your next steps, how you will evolve your infrastructure. Right?
Yeah.
Right. And this is kind of like a stop point for us always. And we try to emphasize here for any project that comes to us, guys, find yourself an SRE team. We don't care how. I don't know, grow them. I don't know, get them from the moon, from the Mars, from get your dad to learn AWS or Kubernetes. We don't care. Get yourself a team that will think about that will have a task of thinking about the overall situation of your infrastructure. You can hire basically us. We do that. We provide infrastructure support with 24/7 on call. Wow. We can do this. We especially do this with Kubernetes because it's basically easier for us to provide some more reliable infrastructure, even on like a smaller scale on Kubernetes, with all the support, with all the like smaller to bigger like SLAs. I mean, like
Yep.
in the scope of this SLAs, because we already invested a lot of our time to figure our ins and outs. If you don't want that, you can go anyway, but get yourself a team, because we for example had a lot of situations where we already see a project running, for example, on AWS, ECS, and do not have enough monitoring. They just pay ridiculous amount of money to Datadog or New Relic, and they still don't get enough insights. Yes, these solutions provide you with excellent instrumentation options, but still any step outside of the general configuration, and you either have to pay more money, even more money, and nobody thought about it, or you are like not allowed because you are limited by the money, for example, or I don't know, any other situation is applicable here too, and you can't implement additional insights, for example, I don't know, it's hard out of the box to know if your container and ECS was restarted a number of times, for example, so it's failing basically. You don't
Yep.
have this, and a lot of projects are in this situation, and they are afraid to move on. They are afraid because they are afraid to invest in the infrastructure team, at least one person.
Right.
Hire it. It will be cheaper for you, or hire us. It will be the price will be comparable. Yeah, it will be additional one. You need to think. You need to check the price. So one of the metrics, if you should move outside Heroku, or if you should just really tackle the money situation, for example, with this metrics solutions or with Heroku itself.
Right.
Does Heroku or Datadog, place whatever there, cost you more than the new infrastructure that you can imagine, plus the team of the size that is needed to manage this infrastructure?
Right.
If it's higher, then you're in the spot. This is like a solution to check yourself, the question to check yourself. If this question is yes, it's higher, the first one is higher, the Heroku price is higher, you definitely need to start rethinking your situation in your next steps. You know?
That's a great analysis. I never thought about it like that. Like, you know, I guess most people won't.
Just
Sure.
just a
Go ahead.
second. I'm really sorry. And yeah, this will be hard thing to swallow. But if it's cheaper than that, you either have a business problem, or just don't like complain about money. Pay them and do your business.
Right. Yeah, I feel like that's probably one of the hardest decisions as a business, is to spend the money on the infrastructure, because it is kind of like a behind the scenes cost that if you're not technical, right, like it does just seem like, why am I paying this, right? Like, and it has to be paid. I mean, especially as
Yeah.
things like if you run into a business problem and it's the problem, you know, even still, like as a business person, you're not going to understand the reason technically why, right? Like that the problem exists and that it needs to be fixed. And so it does. It's probably hard for a business owner that's not technical to make that decision, right? And so
Yeah.
I think that it's definitely a thing that's missed, though, is adding up that cost. Like, and maybe this is something that should be planned for when you're first starting out, right? Like, what is the cost of an infrastructure person to hire, right? And you know, at what point does that cost? And I mean, your equation is perfect. You know, adding up all the costs of, okay, what's my break even point for that infrastructure team, right? And like, okay, once we get there, we need to at least start thinking about it, or starting
Exactly.
right to transition. And that's perfect. And I feel like people don't plan for it. It's kind of like,
Yeah.
it becomes like an emergency, right? Like, oh no, we're spending too much money, now we're bleeding.
You're taking words out of my mouth, literally. Yeah. Yeah.
So
We actually had a situation where a client came to us with the AWS ECS infrastructure and some services around it, and they had a strict restriction where they said we don't want to change the way the infrastructure is. I'm really sorry, the way that the infrastructure is right now, and we literally spent more money introducing the workarounds for the problems that they had. We spent more. They spent more money on us than if they would have hired us to introduce them the full-scale Kubernetes cluster with its support worth like 10 months or 9 months, 24/7 on call, 40 or 80 hours a month, something like that. So yeah, you need to always do these calculations in your head.
Yeah. So I'm curious, like trying to bring the conversation back to like MRSK, right? Like thinking about these like costs and like infrastructure setups and transitions, right? Like where does MRSK provide value in that, right? Like if you start with MRSK at or even if you adopt it at like, you know, tail ends, like if you weaned off of I guess we have two different directions, right? If you transition from something else like Heroku to MRSK, where's the value there? And what value does it provide if you've started there?
Actually, I really like the point in time where you asked this question to return to MRSK, but I'll be pressing the general idea here. I'll try to incorporate MRSK as much as I can here.
We don't have to be specific about it.
Yeah, but you see, I've just talked about find yourself an SRE team. After that, you probably should not care what do they do for the infrastructure. Like, I mean, you don't need to listen for the hyped topics like, okay, we have a brand new platform, we need to go there, or we have a brand new database, we need to go there, or just move to bare metal, it will be cheaper. This is wrong. This is mass plus the technical solutions that your team is capable of doing. If your team is capable of doing a perfectly functioning solution based on MRSK, like for example Basecamp does, because they have a brilliant team. Yes, it's not big, but they're brilliant, and they have a very specific situation where their business is pretty stable. It's huge and it's stable, and so look at this. Look at my hands. They have a stable business. This is a business/math problem that is resolved. They know their money. They have a team figured out beforehand, which can select any solutions that fit their needs and solve any problems that is not automatically solved by this solution. I don't know, if they choose Kubernetes, they may figure out they need to, I don't know, write some additional operators just for them. We saw that in our experience too. Or it's too complex, we don't want to figure out Kubernetes. We already have the expertise to run our own virtual machines like Basecamp does, and just run MRSK on top of them. This is a perfect solution.
Gotcha.
For them. So just let your team do the magic there. Keep your focus on the whys. Why are you doing that? Get that data. Ask your whys and ask your and do your math on how much does it cost. Compare the situation. If it fits into your budget, you're probably doing right. If you can do something more efficient, that comes from more whys. Why do we need Kubernetes? Because, for example, in our case, we can provide you with a stable Kubernetes way cheaper than we will like basically write yourself custom infrastructure on ECS for that particular situation, and this will have much more perks for you. Or we just say you that yeah, uh, stay on Heroku and don't bother with that for at least next 3 months. Pay us like $300 for this consultation and see you in 3 months or a half a year or a year. You're welcome. We saved you like a few 10 to 20,000 bucks.
Yep.
Yeah, in a short term. uh, this is it. And back to MRSK one more time. Actually, this is just a tool. You see, this is just a tool. For example, you can use your notebook like for editing video, and you can use your notebook just for typing code. And obviously, in each situation, you'll have a different setup, and you'll put your effort to tinker that setup for notebook. I'm sorry, laptop. Obviously,
Yep.
my bad. Yeah. Um, and you'll put your efforts into those two different directions, but your starting point was the same. It was only the task that defines your actions. Based on this task, you bought the exact hardware included in that laptop.
Yep.
For example, more RAM or dedicated graphics card, whatever. Yeah, you can combine the solutions. You can do both tasks. But again, this is the goal that you've set for yourself. So you figured out how to solve this goal.
Right.
That's as simple as it is. You don't need to overthink it.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point of like local development that I think is solved by Docker in some ways, right? Is the more you can virtualize and have everybody on a production like system, right? Probably the less problems you'll have infrastructure related when it comes time to using that same app that you've been using locally. There are obvious caveats to that statement. But for the most part, I feel like that's true. Like we're having worked in a Docker container environment, it has definitely solved some infrastructure related issues that would have eventually happened caught earlier because I was using the same kind of infrastructure that it was being deployed to. But I had some questions about your how you think about pricing and doing those equations, right? Like, I think one of the biggest problems business owners face is like kind of like the hidden costs of everything, right? Like, as a perfect example, everybody's like, "Oh, Amazon's so cheap. Like, just use Amazon," right? Like, and people go to use Amazon and then they get their bill and they're just like, "Whoa, I thought this was cheap," right? And they don't add up all the additional costs of all the different resources that they needed at the time until they realized what everything it was that they needed, and maybe that they've configured it not ideally for the case that they are transitioning to, which is the business running and popular, right? And now they're stuck with their setup, and because of how they set it up, it's costing them more, right? Like, how do you like help people think about those costs without knowing that they exist already, right?
I love the twist. I have to admit that this is excellent. Yeah, we like talking. We're like talking in general here and forgetting about MRSK. But yeah, this is actual a brilliant twist. You see, there are no cheap solutions. No cheap solutions. You will be hit with bills everywhere. And the only thing that you can do is to figure out your own way. And how do you figure out your own way? Like all startups do. Basically, it's the same idea. You do experiments as fast as you can. You define the goals, you get the limitations, you figure out the limitations to get to these goals, and you start to work around those limitations. Again, it's all about investigating your situation. uh, Always expect to get huge amount of costs, and always expect to work around them and try to reduce them gradually. And how do you do these experiments? This is actually one of the next parts of that framework inside my head, and that we present to our clients. Figure out the limitations, like for example, the simple one: you need to do 3 business experiments in the next like 2 months, where you'll be hit by a huge amount of loads on your infrastructure. For example, you will run some ad campaigns just to experiment, will your business get up to the speed? Will you be able to use bare metal servers there? Hmm?
Yeah, I mean,
The clock
it's
is
a good.
ticking. The clock is ticking.
It's a good question.
Okay, I'll reduce the anxiety here. No, you won't. You will have to use public clouds. You will have to figure out something, and you have to do it because this will help you figure out your costs on public cloud. Yes, you'll lose some money, but you'll know the data, and you'll be able to step back, because public clouds, you just shut them down in an hour or two, and that's it. You had your experiments, and you have the data that you can work on. You can decide, yeah, I was right about the ads, I was wrong about the, I don't know, the technical solutions, or vice versa, so I should continue using public clouds. I'll be able to squeeze more of them. I can optimize here and there and get the situation up and running because I have this limitation and I know what to do with it. Or you're, for example, your application, we actually had a project where we just had bare metal servers because we had one interesting technical limitation. We needed extremely powerful database server because we were doing, I guess, some cohort analysis, and it was like 7 years ago. So the cost of the same machine on a public cloud would be skyrocketed, and we had limited budget. And that was our technical limitations. We figured out that exact solution, and we worked around how we can invest the rest of the money to make it work. We hired like 2 guys. I joined the project, and we hired another guy who worked on this project full time. Basically, like we shared, like I think it was like 1.5 person per month working on this project, and we figured how to squeeze into the budget because we had this strict technical limitations, and the power of the old systems were lower, especially on public clouds. Same goes vice versa. You may like I've said earlier, you may be in charge of a project. Like we have clients, and they organize public events online, like during the COVID, and they have load for like few hours a month. No, you won't be buying yourself bare metal servers. And here comes MRSK. If you have your limitations figured, for example, you have a person who thinks about it, who figured out how you will do the deployment stuff, how you will do the monitoring stuff, how you will do the log segregation stuff, how to, I don't know, organize your infrastructure as a code and link all these things together. It may be wise to pay him like like to invest like a few additional $1,000 per month into him, into his time, and get yourself a stable infrastructure, which will be run on MRSK. But you will need only like one person. For example, like you will need only one person, because it will be easier for him to understand the whole infrastructure. He'll be able to spend more of his time figuring out how he will work around the limitation that he has. And yeah, he may not be the Kubernetes expert, but he will be paid to think around the situation that you have, and you will benefit from that. You, on the other hand, you may decide to invest your money, for example, like in the solution that we sometimes suggest from our side. Yeah, like just give us a few weeks to like a month of time initially. We'll spin up your new Kubernetes infrastructure that you never thought of. We'll do some magic there. We'll give you our prepared internal framework, which is based on absolutely like open source projects. So it will be accessible for you 100%, and it's possible for you to understand its ins and outs on yourself, and hire yourself your own specialist to manage it if you're afraid of. But after this period, you'll be able to just rely on us to keep it up and running reliably, knowing all the limitations. Because we were thinking about these limitations for years, and this will cost you compared to hiring a specialist. But if you don't hire anyone, expect to work around the limitations on your own. And why are you complaining, guys?
Yeah, I feel like most people will just, they don't want to, they know that there's costs coming for Heroku or something like this, and they know enough to, prop up their own resources, and they'll, go to deploy, and then they, the next step comes, well, how are you monitoring this? And, who is monitoring that? And it's you. And oftentimes...
Wrong. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Wrong. In these situations, often nobody is the correct answer.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I mean, eventually, because you're doing other things, right?
You're doing your business, you're doing the product. You're making your product.
But yeah, I mean, so in that way, I mean, I know I have tested Docker containers before, like just playing with, like if I move this app over to this new provider, do I save any money on that? And it's definitely an experiment worth testing out if you have, a deployment tool in place that can make that easy to do. And so that's where I'm kind of like hopeful of MRSK providing that ability to like make the experimentation easier. And I don't mean like resource, like infrastructure setting up and configuration, right? Because if you're already in that space of using MRSK, I feel like you already know kind of what is involved in setting up resources. No, you don't think that's mostly the case?
I'm sorry, I don't think so, because that's why I was like throwing the word experimentation and test environments. Yeah. Because when people start to do that MVP, for example, or a setup that tests their idea, they're still focused on the idea. They're not thinking about the infrastructure that will sustain your project for long.
Yeah.
So it's still the mindset where you're just like, but where you just think, but I can deploy the application. The problem is solved. No, the problem is not solved, and this is where it gets like bloody, because you have to think about the whole situation. Who, like we were just talking about this before, who will be in charge of the problems for that infrastructure, how these problems should be solved, how you can work around the possible downtimes, wherever. There is a huge amount of topics there, and the tool that solves only the deployment situation is just a tool that solves the deployment situation. And this is a great way to start your experiment. You can work around this tool to grow a bit or to a huge amount, but you need to do the work around the whole situation. Never forget that your project is not just like running in a thin air, just hanging there.
Yeah,
There are business problems around, and there are technical problems around that are outside of the scope of the deploy.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I keep circling back to you know,
I'm sorry.
weighing your costs, I guess. uh
Yeah.
and it's funny that you do mention the like what I was getting at with like experimentation, and I'm going to take, we keep talking about Basecamp. There's this article that they have on signal versus noise, on using spot instances for like
Hmm.
specific, background tasks that they knew that they were just like spending too much money on for the amount of processing that it was doing. And
Hmm.
they switched to using spot instances, and it came with its own problems.
Yeah,
But
of course, of course.
because they had thought it through and had like kind of the people there to work through those problems and think through them, it became less of a problem for them. But it's
Exactly.
funny because in the end they will probably cannibalize all of their work on this, and I think that's a good point to bring up, is that these experimentations, may lead to like nothing, and that's okay, right? Like it's not always worth the time to invest in these experiments, right? Where you're testing, what you can and can't do with your infrastructure, and I feel like that's a common thing that's not done, right? Like, and maybe there's probably a framework or something I'm not thinking of that, not necessarily coding wise, but where there's a process for testing, these specific goals, or maybe you have some pricing that you're trying to cut down a certain amount,
Hmm.
right? Where you can go through a process of, okay, we have this long to test this, and we know that we're willing to spend this much money investigating, right? No matter what. So if we eat it, that's fine. But if not, we can save, we hope to save this, right? Uh, and in the end, I feel like more often than not, your infrastructure is better for it, right? Like
Of
you
course.
will save more money just from that investigation process, because people have learned and investigated and gotten to all those contact points that you ignore, right? Because I know
Yeah.
when I do a one-off project or something, like, it's not my business, but like, as most startups, like, you the prop up the infrastructure, whatever you start with, and then you just like, well, now I need to do the product, right? Like you're saying. And
Hmm.
so, it goes in the background, and then like, if you could do these sprints, like, it's always worth it. Like, spend the money, you're going to be spending it anyway. The sooner
Hmm.
you can run the experiments, the better. uh, but it's hard, I guess, to decide to do that over product, right? um, so I don't know, do you have any closing statements on that? Like, how do you know the right time to invest in infrastructure versus product development?
Actually, I already told you about
Right,
that.
it's the formula, right? Like,
Yeah, always watch out for the technical limitations, which are highlighted by money sometimes. Expect there are some technical limitations behind behind the money that you see, the amount of money that you see on the bill, and do that math periodically. Like, will you be able to reduce the costs of the infrastructure if you hire yourself a proper team which knows ins and outs of a different kind of infrastructure, or grow it yourself or hire a company to help you there. You may be you may be like you may get some additional value there, because sometimes the answer may be unexpected at first, because the answer like still stay with your old infrastructure and figure out more business things for now, maybe as valuable as how should we reduce the costs. Or yes, you can like do those experiments. Actually, I have one great thing to like add to your final thought. I love this thing that called growth hacking. We actually really had a great experience with this concept and implementing it on some of our projects where the clients were open to some new ideas, and those were pretty huge clients. And yeah, this helps sometimes drastically, and it can be applied in all the ways, like in business and in the technical stuff, like do the like define the basic idea is there's you create an assumption. I don't know the right words in English, how they call it in the framework, but you figure out some assumption. You set the metric which will be monitored by you to evaluate that assumption, and you set a time limit after which you do this evaluation. If it works for you, you have a win. If it doesn't, just stop, try the next assumption. You can always try to use this framework. It has strict rules how not to go circles, but this is outside of the current topic. But yeah, this is a valuable framework for resolving some problems.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of growth hacking. It reminds me of AppSumo. They used to have a I don't know what you call it, like a workshop, and they would have you if you were interested about building your own company or your business. They were like, well, just try and sell something on Craigslist, right? And see if you can get people to pay you money for something that you were trying to sell. It doesn't even have to exist, right? And you can refund the money. And like they just did this experiment. Like if you can get somebody to buy something from you, then that proves it's valuable, right? Like, and if you like think that you have this great idea that's going to make thousands of people, like you have to prove it, right? And I feel, and that's true like of not just selling, right? Like it's true of the infrastructure too. Like if you decide to use MRSK, right? Like you have to prove that there's value in that for you.
For you,
right? And I think that's kind of like an underlying thing here is like it's not for everybody. It's not like a one-all. This is the deployment tool you're going to use for Rails, right? And that's fair because it's nothing is. Even setting up your business, you can follow the growth hacking and still not make any money.
Yep, for sure.
All right,
I guess this was our first pick about growth hacking.
Yeah, that's so funny. Yeah, speaking of which, we're coming to the end of the show here. Is there anything else you wanted to touch on briefly here before we move into picks?
I don't know. I just I can tell you that we'll be glad to help anyone with infrastructure. Yeah, because we see that a lot of people around us struggling with that, and we urge people to try and think about this just a bit more, and we are ready to help with that. Just a small like advertisement, but it's really honest here.
Yeah, I mean, I've followed quite a few of the Evil Martians blog posts that have helped me in my deployment struggles. So, thank you for that. But
you're welcome.
Yeah, let's move into picks. I could go first, just to set the stage here. Make it easy for you.
Please do.
Let's see. I've been on. I just got back from sabbatical, and I've been playing Zelda: Tears of Kingdom, which is just a phenomenal game. very impressive. I can't speak highly enough of it. Probably wasted way too much time just on the couch. But
Hmm.
uh, outside of that, well, there was one other thing I wanted to share here. This is really I try and do a funny pick every time. That somebody has used AI to have Elvis sing "Baby Got Back," which
Oh.
is a popular song from the '90s.
Hmm.
But
Okay.
it's so funny, and I'm kind of looking forward to more remixes like this. Uh, so
Let me save the link.
so check it out.
Yeah, I need to save it. Just give me a second. I'll give you my picks. Uh, okay, if we're talking, can I continue? Yeah, is it?
Yeah, yeah.
Are
What
you
do you got?
finished? Yeah, thank you. If we're talking about games, I'm not like a huge gamer myself, but I recently stumbled upon this game that is called Rain World. I was fascinated how like organic it is, even if it's like a pixelated game. I really do want to spend some time playing it. Like if you haven't seen the game process and the game physics, do so. It's amazing. It's like totally different level for a platformer to be like that. Yeah, and my actual pick for today, actually, I'm recently into some 3D printing, and I do believe it's not like for everyone, but it's like a huge world, and it allows my inner engineer to not only tackle kind of software engineering but actual hardware engineering. And I can give you some example. For example, I used the keyboard, a keyboard like that, which is mostly 3D printed by me. It's And the other thing that is amazing, that these are the open projects, so it's like real physical open source inside this community. And I don't know how the frame will be cropped, but I literally have like a 3D printer frame here that I'm assembling right now, step by step. It will take a lot of time, whatever. But yeah, these are the open projects that you open and you start to assemble, and you obviously modify them. And this is huge, huge. Like,
That is
it
so
solves
cool.
some problems. Like I needed a compact ergonomic keyboard. I did it myself.
Are you
I
printing
needed
the
like
keycaps too?
not these exact ones, but on a different keyboards, I've printed keycaps, and they
That's
look
awesome.
way better on that keyboard than the original ones.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because
I
they
didn't think
sculpted in a
about that.
different way.
Oh, okay.
That keyboard is flat, and they are sculpted to make it like 3D, three-dimensional kinda,
Oh,
so they
that's
are
cool.
more comfortable.
That's great. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that link. I'm gonna have to play with that as well.
Yeah, I can probably give you some links to this keyboards. For example, it's a project by the guy whose nickname is Bastard KB. He does amazing job, and I can give you the link to the printer that I am trying to build, kinda at the moment.
That's
But
awesome.
these are open source. These are open source.
I know it's mind blowing.
Bonkers. Yeah, I can touch open source. It's not bits and bytes.
Yeah, that reminds me of I should add another pick here. You just reminded me of Tom's Hardware or Tom's Guide. They have like a 3D printing, like best of 3D printing for the year, like roundup,
Uh-huh.
and
Uh-huh.
it's all just stuff you could download and use. And like some of the composition, like I didn't even think like you could build parts of stuff that like fit together and like make like 3D sculptures and stuff. The more like you get into like they have this great roundup of just like the wildest things that you can print, all
Definitely,
open,
yeah.
and you just click download and print it. It's wild. Yeah,
Yeah, it's a mind-blowing community. I don't know how it can exist, but it exists and it
right.
blossoms. Amazing.
Well, thank you for coming on. This was a great conversation. I'm glad we didn't dive too heavily into the technical discussion of MRSK because we've done that in another episode, but also I love how the conversation evolved from pricing and investigation and just all of the infrastructure related things that aren't MRSK that you should be thinking about while you're diving in. And it is definitely kind of a breath of fresh air to think about and talk about. So thank you for
Thank you
that.
so much.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm really glad that you called me to this podcast. I'm honored to be here, and this was a great conversation. Thank you for your questions and for like allowing me to steer it a bit to this part, because I had this like thought process. I thought this will be valuable because more people can relate to it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm not hands down as much as you are. So it was great to get your insights on, what people should be thinking about and not, and what to watch out for sure. So thanks again for coming on.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, until next time. Yep.
I hope we'll see each other again.
Oh yeah, for sure. I attend a lot of virtual events, and unfortunately, those have like gotten less and less. But hopefully, I can get out of my house. I've I've set up my own 3D printer in the background and a laser cutter, and I have too many tools now to keep me busy to travel to a conference or something. But we'll see each other again for sure.
Sure. Thank you so much. See you.
All right, sounds good.